Trigger warning. This story talks and/or mentions death and illness. The love of my life is dying, and he wants me to date his doctor. Part 1. The love of my life is dying, and I have no fucking idea how to deal with it. For one thing, I'm never sure what to think about first. Sometimes it's about cooking something for Josh, my boyfriend. Sometimes it's about cleaning, and other times it's about the economic situation that we have suddenly found ourselves in. If I'm not thinking about those things, then I'm thinking about making sure that Josh has taken all of his medicines for the day. Because apparently, if anything his doctor is sure about, is that although Josh will not live long, we have to make sure that it's not too painful for him. And honestly, during my moments of weakness, I always end up thinking that I should have taken the warning when it was first given to me. But I wear my heart on my sleeves. So I put the warning aside and fell in love with an ailing person. Now this is the result. You know, right? I don't watch this shit, Josh says, pulling me out of my Riviera. I'm sorry, I reply and grab the remote. It is a shit show. American reality shows suck anyways. I'm not sure why I was putting Josh through such pain. But you know what they say about falling in love with the strangest thing. Cartoon Network is probably the safest option now, so I'll put that on. I know about falling in love in the strangest places, he replies, a hint of a smile on his face. Have you eaten? You pay so much attention to me. Show some love to yourself, Eric. I do, I reply and get up before you can see my tears. Liar, Josh replies, his tone now mournful. You're a big fat liar, Eric. That is usually how our interactions go these days. It's not like they didn't get bad before, but sometimes now all we do is say mournful stuff to each other, skirting around the major elephant in the room, and never really daring to acknowledge it. Sometimes I get tired of running around in circles. Whenever that happens, I lock myself in the balcony and smoke to my heart's content. One of these days, I'm going to get cancer because of it. Sometimes Josh follows after me. The sound of the television now background noise. Give that to me, he says, pointing at the cigarette between my fingers. I snort. Do you want to get cancer now? Is one not enough? I don't think my body's capable of building a new disease, so no. Josh snatches a cigarette from my hand, and with trembling fingers makes do with it. I don't want you to die terribly and alone, Eric. Either. Stop smoking and drinking or find yourself a new guy. Why don't you shut up? I really thought my words lack any real bite. The heart's doing bad. Please don't say harsh things to me. I poke my tongue against my cheek and look at his slim frame. Whenever any of our relatives come to meet us, they're always shocked at the sight of Josh. They say, Josh, you've lost so much weight. As if Josh doesn't already know that. When one looks at Josh now, they will not believe me if I tell him Josh used to be a local boxer in his better days. But now, all he is long limbs with pale, thin skin stretched over them. His disease now eating him from within. Why are you looking at me like that? Josh asks. Like how? Like you don't want to miss anything. Josh answers and dips his head low. You know, that makes me feel sad. Stop doing that. Well, you cannot get upset at me for trying to put everything in my head. The details. Old age will take that away from you, he answers. I'm far from old age, though. This time my voice cracks. God, to even imagine living without him for the next 40 or 50, or even more years is impossible. It sounds like a personal hell to me. I feel like I'm being punished. I say next, and perhaps I should learn to keep my mouth shut for loving you. There are tears in Josh's eyes. When he looks for me, I did warn you, though. Oh, well, there it goes. A few days later, Josh is sitting on the balcony, swinging his legs back and forth, as if he's a kid. In some ways, he is. Just a week or so ago, he said to me, now that I know my death is near, I fear I'm going to forget what carelessness feels like. The same day, he burned his hand on the stove, because apparently that reminded him that he was still alive. It was a horrible sight to come to, and to hear him say those words. Even more horrible now. I spend most of my time at home. My company was kind enough to let me work from home. I have an inkling that they probably believe this issue of mine would be cleared within a few weeks anyway, so no issue in giving work from home. So, Josh says, looking at me with his tired, sunken eyes. So? I ask, stopping my work for a while. What do you think? About what? I ask. How are we paying the bills, Eric? I poke my tongue against my cheek. I will see what I can do. I can ask for my salary if that works out. Will they pay? Josh asks, sounding tired. Sometimes I miss making things easy for you. When was the last time I went to the office anyway? Doesn't matter, I reply. I will find some way. My kidney has failed, Eric, Josh replies, as if I don't already know that. It's the second time. I do not understand why you're wasting money. It's not wasting money if it's going to save your life, I reply. As if. Josh sighs and looks away from me. For a few minutes, he remains silent. I nearly return to my work, grateful that this conversation will not lead to another argument. But my hope remains fickle because Josh turns to me with a smile. Why don't you ask for help, he asks. From who? I ask. My parents are dead and yours don't want anything to do with us. I can beg them, though. They probably want that. Let's not start that, Eric. You know better than that. Josh gets up to sit next to me. I know the conversation is far from over, so I switch off my laptop and turn to him. You can ask Jack. The scoff that I let out is loud in our home. Jack, are you serious? He's a friend, Josh replies, sounding a little irritated now. He will help. He is your doctor, I exclaim. Do you know how absurd your suggestion sounds? You want me to ask the man to loan us some money so that I can pay him? That sounds insane, Josh shrugs. Not like we have any other option. Still, no. Josh, I will not do that. Josh sighs and lies down on the bed. He has a crush on you. He reminds me. You know it's not going to be very difficult. Besides, he did call you gorgeous once. The laugh that I let out isn't humorous. That was when you weren't sick and when he wasn't your doctor. Heck, he thought I was single. Josh shrugs. Doesn't change the fact that he's got a crush on you. Please don't do that, Josh, I reply and lie next to him. Why don't we sleep? Okay, Josh replies, sounding just a tad bit tired now. A couple of days later, Jack has come to meet Josh to give him a regular checkup outside the hospital vicinity. But Josh insists it's more for me than for him. The very idea of that is ridiculous. The thought that he's trying to set me up with the first guy he sees me next to is bizarre. The thought that he's accepted his fate in itself is bizarre. But Jack tells me that Josh is doing alright. Well, as alright as he can in his condition. And I do not know how to respond to that. Why do doctors lie when they know there's no hope? Well, I'm retiring to bed, Josh announces past 9 p.m. You haven't eaten anything, I reply, reminding him the last time he ate was 7 p.m. Dinner will be ready in a while, so wait it out. I'm tired, Eric, he informs me, and then directs a smile at Jack. I've eaten. I've taken my medicine. Any more food and I will die a fat man. But still, I insist. Please, Eric? Let me have the last word once in a while. I know it isn't said to reprimand me, but I feel the same anyway. I duck my head low, murmur a small good night to him, and return to cooking. Jack stands on the edge of the living room, a little more awkwardly than before. Please, Jack, Josh says before he leaves. Make sure you eat before you leave. Eric is a brilliant cook. It was a running joke between us that he should be the house husband between us both. Well, when I was better anyway. Jack gives us both a smile, but doesn't say anything. He's polite like that. When Josh leaves, Jack stands in the living room for a while before he comes to me in the kitchen. He stands a little too close to me, and desperate as I am for the human touch, do not tell him to stand away. I hope you're doing well, he says, and places his wine glass in the sink. Can I help with anything? And please, I insist. I'm not a guest. I'm a friend. I give him a smile. Everything's done, actually. If you want, you can help me set up the dining table. This should be quick. Oh, I can do that, he replies. Thank you. Dinner is a quick affair. We do not have much to speak to each other, and I'm very conscious of Josh. I know he's not sleeping. He's waiting, probably, to see if I will do something. Josh is crazy like that, and I'm not in the mood to prove his theory right. His theory that there's a good chance that I may fall in love with his doctor after his death. After all, no idea is more bizarre than that. How's work? Jack asks. I shrug in response. As good or bad as it can be. Jack takes a moment to respond. Do you want any help, Eric? And I'm not sure what comes over me, but I tell him that he may be helpful after all. It's probably because of the words Josh has been saying for a long while, that we can ask for Jack's help, and that we do not have much money to make sure Josh's treatment goes smoothly. And as ashamed as I am to say it, I tell him that he can help me with money. It's for, some property? I begin sweating buckets, because I know I'm not a good liar. Josh has wanted to build a home there for a while, and he says that, since his illness is getting bad, we should be quick about that. Jack smiles at me, and I know he can see through me. Okay, Eric. Okay? I asked, looking at him in surprise. But you don't even know how much I need. Do I need to? I'll help you regardless. I swallow. I don't know what to say. Jack gives me a small laugh. Traditionally, we say thank you. I smile at him. Thank you, Jack. And, he says, next, pointing at my face. There's something on your face. Crap, I swallow and try to wipe it away. But the effort is fruitless, and the traditional Hollywood cliché wins. Jack leans over the table and grabs a napkin and dabs it over the corner of my mouth. And suddenly I hope that Josh hasn't seen it half an hour later, when the house is very silent and Josh is definitely asleep. Jack and I enter the balcony. I bring out a cigarette and place it between my lips, before offering another to Jack. He smiles at me in a kind way doctors do and shakes his head. You don't smoke? I ask. I avoid, he agrees. As a doctor, I have got to make the right choices. Right choices are overrated, I tell him, snorting as I light my cigarette. Jack goes silent for a while, and then unexpectedly grabs a cigarette from my mouth. I look at him, a little astounded, but he only smiles in return. You're correct. Right choices are overrated. And while sharing the cigarette, we start talking about Josh. And immediately the mood turns mournful, and before I know what's happening, I'm leaning into Jack's sturdy space to hug him. When he runs a hand through my hair, I know I should push him away, but kindness is needed, and I hug him tighter. Even though we don't do anything, I feel like a cheater. A few days later. Trauma bonding is a real thing, by the way, Josh tells me, looking at me over the new book he's reading. It's a thick book with more than 1,000 pages, and Josh often jokes that he will not stay alive to finish it all. What's that got to do with us, I ask. Nothing. I'm saying if something like trauma bonding can be real, then so can grief bonding. I don't know if there's a term for that, but my question stays the same. Why are we talking about it? Jack is our friend. He's been for a long time. You do not think he's grieving my death too? His jokes these days sound so sad. I almost end up smacking him. You're still alive, I remind him. Yeah, but I'm in the process of dying. Josh puts down his book. Jack is going through the same thing as you are. This is a good opportunity to get close. And do what? I ask. Josh shrugs. Find a common ground. A few days later. Bella, my sister, is sitting on the porch with her 2 kids when I arrive at her place. I informed her earlier that we needed to talk about something that I've admittedly been thinking about for some time. I know she knows what I'm thinking. Let me send them inside, she tells me, and waves her children inside. I smile at the kids until they leave. What is it, Eric? Got any updates about your boyfriend or something? You know what I'm thinking, I reply, sitting next to her. Bella is my older sister, and after our parents died, she practically raised me. Then, she got lucky in life and found the love of her life. Now she's got a lovely family, and I'm about to lose mine. What do people do in these situations? I'm about to ask her to help raise mine. Have you talked to him? She asks. I shrug. I will, eventually. You know you need his consent first before we take this step, right? She asks. Her tone harsh, as if she's annoyed. Then her expression softens. Eric, I know you're afraid, and I'm here to help. I will be your surrogate, but inform him first about what's going on in your head. That's important. I will talk to Josh. How else will I be able to do it? I sigh and lean against a chair. Starting up at the open sky is right in front of us. You think he will be okay? Do you think he will like it? Bella shrugs. His birthday's coming up, right? Tell him it's a birthday gift. That's cruel, I tell her. Okay, I get it. That is cruel. But tell him your fears. Maybe he will understand. I nod at her. I will. The same day, I decided to talk to Josh about it. I know the longer I wait, the harder it will be to convince him of the same. And honestly, I want this to work out. Greedy as I am to have something of Josh behind, I do not really intend to stop at anything. But Josh looked a little skeptical at my words. Eric, you're afraid, Josh tells me. There's no other explanation for this. I'm not afraid. I should have thought of this before anyways. Do you understand how mean that sounds? What if the baby gets it? We don't know that, I reply, sounding more confident than I felt. Let's try. Oh no, he tells me and shakes his head. We are not doing that. Eric, he says next when I throw my hands in the air. You're greedy. You're acting greedy because you don't want to deal with grief. This is not how things work, I stare at him for a moment. Can you blame me for that? Josh's expression softens. No, I think I would have done the same. A few days later, for some reason, Josh decides to give it a try. The samples are taken and everything seems to be going well. And then Josh suggests that we should talk to the doctors first, before making the final decision. Though annoyed and exhausted, I agree with him. Bella's okay with it? Josh asks, walking side by side. She brought it to my attention first, I tell him, and then I couldn't move on. Josh softly smiles at me. Let's hope that it works out then. I give him a fickle of a smile. Yes, Josh. I want that very badly, honestly. Of course, the doctor has much to tell us. We cannot guarantee that the baby will not have it, or will not be more prone to it as it grows. So, I say, does that mean we cannot take the chance? The doctor shakes his head. Of course you can. But your question was if the baby should have it. I'm answering your question. Just because a parent has a certain disease does not mean the baby will definitely have it too. But the baby will be at a higher risk than most babies. And I cannot lie about that fact. So it's a bad idea, Josh concludes. No, it's not, I tell him. We can still try. Don't be greedy, he tells me. We're not going to risk a baby's life just because you cannot handle grief, Eric. I'm sorry if that sounds horrible. By now, both of us have walked out of the doctor's office. The doctor said we can still try, I insist. Think about having a copy of yours. One that I won't even get to meet? Josh asks, his voice now hysteric. I know that I've said the wrong thing and backtracked. I didn't mean that, Josh. Listen, we can try. No, we cannot, Josh replies, his tone firm. I don't want you to end up with another version of me, alright? I'd rather you just focus on someone else. And who might that be? I ask. Jack, Josh answers. He's a good guy. Listen, take the sample back. We're not talking about it again. When I do not answer, he glares at me. Take the sample back, Eric. We're not doing it. I swallow. I'm not going to do it, but I nod at him anyway. Okay. A few weeks later, I meet Jack in the supermarket next. It's after 10 and the supermarket is empty, save for 4 or 5 of the customers. Jack and I are 2 of them. He finds me first, but I notice him in the reflection of a mirror without his notice. Hi, he says. Oh, Jack, hi. Late night shopping? He asks, pointing at my basket. I nod at him. Yeah, Josh has been sick a lot these days. I didn't get the time the entire week and now I'm here. There's nothing at home. He nods at me, a solemn look on his face. Would you like some ice cream? Ah, I reply, looking around us. I guess that's all right with me? Okay, Jack smiles at me and then stretches his arm around my body to grab 2 ice cream cones. Despite the intimacy of the position, I try not to overthink it. In a way, I'm glad that Josh is not here to see this. And because Jack is a friend and he knows almost everything about us anyway, I decided to tell him about the surrogacy plans. He nods at me and stares ahead at the empty road. It's not a very bad idea, he tells me. The doctor warned us and Josh doesn't want to take the risk. He has every reason to, Eric. Jack turns to me. His posture is so relaxed yet confident that I cannot help but relax too. At the same time, although the risk is always high, the disease itself isn't contagious. Just because Josh has it doesn't necessarily mean your baby will have it too. If you both are alright with the idea, then you guys don't need to stress much on it. The only reason he's saying no is because he's afraid I will have to deal with the pain again. He doesn't want that for me. Ah, Jack says, smiling at me. Love. I nod at him, and then I lean my head against his bicep. I'm going to miss him. You do not have to do it alone, Jack tells me softly. I've been a friend over 7 years now. I guess we can learn to deal with it together. Grief bonding, I mutter, and I look at him. Our faces only inches away. Despite the closeness and need for intimacy, I do not feel that I really need to kiss him. Josh says it's that, I tell him when he looks confused. He says he doesn't know if there's an actual term for it, but he calls it that. Says we should become better friends because we're dealing with the same. I'm not dealing with the same pain though, Jack murmurs, and I pull back to give him a strange look. Honestly, we cannot compare pain. What you feel and what I feel are different. You're losing your lover, and I'm losing a friend. I've known him for my whole life. I agree. But maybe we can learn to live with it and grow with it together, Jack suggests. When I only nod at him, he brings a hand close to my face to push away the fringes of my eyes. I pull back from his touch, and we do not talk about it again. Jack returns to his home, and I return to mine. I decide not to tell Josh about it, even though nothing really happened between us. A few days later, in the next few days, Josh's health deteriorates. The doctors, one of them being Jack, tell me it's the end, and Josh will probably not live past this weekend. I decide to ignore their words and focus on making sure Josh isn't in pain. In the last few days over the phone, Bella and I have argued endlessly about the surrogacy. She's ready to do it, but is worried that Josh will die without knowing it. Each time I tell her that I will tell Josh, he will have to know for this to work. But before anything like that can happen, Josh goes into a coma. How bad will it be if he dies without knowing? I ask Bella. Very bad, she replies. You know better than that. You'll not be able to live with the guilt of it. I'm telling him, though, I reply, sounding unsure even to myself. And she's not listening. Bella reminds me rather gently. Yes, I agree. Days before he went into a coma, Josh looked at me and asked me what I thought of the good doctor. I looked at him in return, my eyebrows raised in mock concern. Whatever does that mean? I asked, looking away to hide my guilt. He clearly likes you, Josh replied, and threw his hands in the air with a sigh. And what am I supposed to do with that information? I asked. Respond, Josh replied. I'm not going to respond to anything, Josh. Can we drop it already? But he likes you, and you'll probably be lonely after I... He stopped and shook his head. I know how you are as a person, and I know that you will eat yourself up over this, but when I'm gone, you can always get together with him. Staying together will heal you better and quickly. I said we can drop it, Josh? You'll be lonely, Josh said, suddenly looking very tired and exhausted. And what if I prefer it that way? I asked. I can always have the baby. I'm dropping it. Now you drop that too, he looked at me. Will you? I shrugged at him. Then a few days later, he went into a coma. A couple days later, because now I can stay at the hospital with Josh, I often get to meet Jack whenever he's on duty. Something I admit I both rejoice and hate. Rejoice because Jack is familiar and a friendly face among the sea of unfamiliar ones, and the time isn't right, and I am anything but stable. And Jack seems like my best bet at keeping sane. I hate it because although I like that I'm around a familiar face, I dislike that it's him. Because suddenly all that Josh has said makes sense. It's obvious Jack likes me. The question is, do I want to take a chance with him? No. Even the thought of that is strange. Josh is on his deathbed and I'm supposed to think if I will be able to hit it off with his doctor? That's the last thing on my mind. Even when Jack does what he does a couple days later. It's late at night and Josh gave us some responses throughout the day. Jack and the other doctor, Ellie, has said that that's a good thing, although not a very hopeful thing. But I hung up on the words and imagined that maybe Josh would get better and come out better after this weekend. And it's that very thing that Jack and I started discussing in the dead of night. Jack's on his break. There's a good chance that he'll live, right? I ask. Jack gives me a particular look. What do you want me to tell you? The truth, I tell him. Although that's the last thing I want to hear. I want to know if Josh will be alright. Josh is not going to be alright, Eric. He's dying. Got 2 minor heart attacks in the last 2 days. Do you think it's getting better? His words are cruel. And although I open and close my mouth to reply, I'm not sure what to say. Please shut up. I'm sorry, Jack tells me, and exchanges a hand for me to take. I hate that he's like that. It's not his fault. He was born with it. It's no one's fault. The symptoms were always present. They got triggered and that's natural, Eric. Unfair, but natural. His hand finds me in the dark, and because it's so quiet outside, I unwittingly step close to him. We were supposed to live out our life together, I inform him, as if he hasn't heard that one before. Now we'll have to go and bury him? That's cruel. I'm sorry, he tells me, and squeezes my hand. And I'm not sure what he understands by our closeness, but before I know it, he has dipped his head to my height to plant a kiss on my mouth. After a flicker of surprise, I feel upset. I push him away and look at him, confused and horrified. What was that? I'm sorry, he says and steps away. I thought, were you the one pushing thoughts in Josh's head? About what, he asks. About you and me. About you having a chance with me or some stuff. No, Jack replies and shakes his head. I've never done that. Why would I? Then why did you kiss me? Because I like you, Jack replies, and then sighs. Clearly wrong timing. I'm sorry. I misunderstood things and not that anything can justify my behavior, but still. Bye, I tell him. Eric? I said bye. Okay, I will see you in the morning, alright? Josh's regular checkups. Yeah, alright. I watch him leave, and when I'm sure he's no longer there, I throw my phone against the wall in an act that I almost immediately regret. But before anything else can happen, Josh dies in his sleep. He never wakes up from his coma, and the doctor, Jack, tells me that he's sorry he couldn't save Josh. I'm not sure what to say to him, so I tell him that I need some time alone, And then for the first time in the longest time, I finally cry. A few days later, Jack shows up at Josh's funeral. He sits in the back and does not come to meet me until everyone's gone. Bella sits next to me throughout the process and holds my hand whenever she thinks I need it. In most cases, I need it. There's a reason why she's such a good sister. After the funeral is over and I've said my piece, Jack comes to stand next to me. "How are you doing?" "Bad," I tell him. Sleep evades me, even though that's all I want. "If it continues, you can tell me," Jack says. "I will help." "Sure. Doctors have a cure for everything. Do you have a cure for heartbreak?" A furrow comes between his brows. "You're drunk." He's not asking, he's making a statement. "Are you alright? Should I drive you home?" I talked to Bella. Shit was so crazy. I had to drink. I wave my hand at his face. "Will you come and drink with me tonight? I need it." I don't drink, Eric. I know I'm going to regret it, but even then I hold his hand and press a kiss on the corner of his mouth. "I need a drink. Will you come with me?" "You and I both know I should not do it alone." I repeat. Jack swallows, and I feel a tad bit guilty about using his feelings. But then he says yes, and I know it doesn't have to be so bad. So after I wave Bella goodbye, and she promises me that she will think about surrogacy, something that she's been doing a lot lately, Jack and I leave in his car. And by the night, I am drunk out of my wits. If there's anything I did with him the night before, I do not remember it the next morning. Not that I want to. To be continued. Trigger warning. This story talks and/or mentions death and illness. The love of my life is dying, and he wants me to date his doctor. Part 2. It's been more than a year since Josh's death, but I still haven't got the answer to, what are you supposed to do when you lose a lover? Sure, I'm not the first person to go through this pain, and I certainly won't be the last. But what actually should a human be doing in such situations? I can go out and ask the elderly people. That seems like the easiest way to do it, so I did it. I still remember the first person I talked to. It was an old man, in his late 70s. He lost his wife some 5 years ago, and was near the brink of death himself. He claimed he had lived enough, and when I asked him how he dealt with the pain of his wife's death, he answered, "Well, I had a whole lifetime to spend with her. Sometimes it wasn't easy, but when she needed me, I was there for her, and when I needed her, she was there for me." Was it enough? I asked foolishly. I thought that wasn't the answer I wanted. You still lost her. How did you deal with it? The old man shrugged, and I saw a peace in his stance, something that would take me years to gain. You learn to live with the pain. And I thought, and still think, that was the saddest fucking answer. Yet somehow, I liked it. I like it because it validates my feelings for Josh's death. The old man is a man who has lived his life and is about to die, and if he learned to deal with it, I would too. That doesn't mean it's easy to deal with the pain, though. If anything, it's almost impossible at times. How do you tell yourself that there's no one to turn to, so get the fuck over yourself? I mean, there's 100 different ways to do that. Certain. I've mentioned one just earlier, but is there an easy way? A way to make the answer easier to swallow, and to get it done with so that you can deal with other issues? No. The answer is a resounding no. I've been trying to find it for over a year, nearly 2 years now, and the answer is still a loud no. You cannot just get over the pain of losing your loved ones. You learn to deal with it, or you avoid the thought altogether. You get yourself busy with so many things at once that you do not even have the time to stop and think, oh God, maybe I am screwed. I did just that. Obviously, my first solution was Jack. Jack is a nice guy. He claims that he hasn't gotten over me yet, and that if I give him a chance, even now, he will come rushing towards me. It's such a funny confession because how do you stay hung up over the same person for nearly a decade? Like, hello, move on. But that doesn't mean I haven't used his feelings to deal with my emotional imbalance. I have. Oh, I have. It started on the day of the funeral. I brought Jack with me to my house and told him that it would be a nice idea to drink. We were still alive. I told him. I was already drunk, and then I got more and more drunk. By the time Jack's hand slipped over my thigh and my arms wound around his shoulders, I knew I would not be able to stop it. And true to my fear, exactly that happened. We didn't go all the way though. Nope, but we kissed. We kissed so much that my lips hurt the next morning, when I vomited my guts out in the bathroom. And then it got very bad. Looking back at it now, I can say with conviction that I'd lost my goddamn mind. Jack wasn't the only guy I was fooling around with to deal with my grief, even though I had someone to look after. Who was it? one must wonder. After Josh died, Bella and I had a question to deal with. Will the surrogacy happen? It was an ethical question. It still is. Josh and I discussed surrogacy, and he feared the possibility so much that Josh said he didn't want the surrogacy to happen. He didn't want a copy of himself, not when there was a good chance that the baby would have SLE too. But I didn't take the sample back from the hospital. Bella and I talked and talked, but I never got the chance to tell Josh, not in the way he could say he was alright with it. And then Josh died. And then we were still left with the question. But time was passing, and we had to come to a quick decision. Then we did. Joan, with her curly hair and sweet little face, resembles Josh to such a great degree that it almost feels like he has come back in the form of his own daughter. It's a delightful thought. When Jack was still with me, he helped me raise her. I still remember the first day he carried Joan, less than a year ago. "She's tiny," Jack said, looking down at Joan as if he hadn't seen a baby before. "You're a doctor," I reminded him. Jack laughed. "Oh, not yours." I gave him a dry smile. "It was tough work." "You did well," Jack said. "She's very beautiful and tiny." Then we put her to bed, and Jack cornered me and asked me if I wanted a kiss. I told him he shouldn't ask me such questions. I wasn't in the right mind, and I didn't want to give him hope that I knew he wouldn't be able to survive with. "Okay," he said and stepped back. "I will go. Thanks for calling me." "Stay," I said and held his hand. "What do you want from me?" Jack begged. "You must know how I feel." "Sorry," I told him, probably not really meaning it. "I am really sorry." "But you will not let me go?" he asked, softer this time. "I'm sorry," I told him again. "You're the only person who knows how it feels. You've been there for the whole thing. You must understand how I feel." "I do not," Jack answered truthfully, "but I want to." He didn't mind being used, so each time I gave him hope. He tried to grasp it as if he were grasping for straws. 4 months later, I tried to make it up with him. It was Josh's dying wish, after all. It was only fair that I fulfilled one of his wishes. One of the following months, as he lay on my bed, he looked at me with curiosity. "What?" I asked, already annoyed. "You do know you have Joan to look after, right?" he asked. "Thanks for reminding me of my daughter." "Do you remember she's your daughter?" "What's it supposed to mean?" I asked and threw my hands in the air. "It's been over a year and you're still..." "I'm still what?" I asked, already in the mood to argue. "You sound defensive. You do not like to hear what I want to say. You're not my boyfriend, so..." I knew I was mean. I still know that. But at that time I was filled with so much anger at the unfairness of the situation that I couldn't care less if I was hurting Jack's feelings. A thought that I could not digest today. "You come here, you sleep with me, and that's it." "You're being mean," he said. "Thanks." "You were never this mean," he said next. "What do you want me to say to you?" Jack shrugged. "Why don't you try living for your daughter?" "I've been trying to do exactly that. Otherwise I would have killed myself by now." "Oh, yes, that. How could I forget the particular thing?" Soon after Josh's death, I did it for the first time. It did not at all feel satisfying. Heck, it felt stupid as hell. But I continued it, because people on the internet said it felt like the perfect escapism. And that was exactly what I wanted. I continued it, even when I was seeing Jack, and then stopped when Joan first came into my life. That doesn't mean that I do not return to it. It just means it's a lot better now. 7 months ago, I ended it all with Jack. When I did that, I believed I would relapse, or worse. But nothing of that sort happened. Jack made it easy for me. "You want to break up?" he said, looking at me through his glasses. "Even though we never truly dated?" I shrugged. "Seems like the right thing to say." "We never dated," he said again. "I had a year to win you over and we still never dated," he sounded mournful. I counted the years he had been in love with me and I felt sorry for him. "I'm sorry," I told him. "In your defense, it wasn't the best time, or circumstance, or situation." Jack closed his eyes with a sigh. "I never stood a chance, did I?" "Sorry," I told him again. I wasn't sure what he wanted me to tell him. "So I should leave?" I nodded at him, watched him as he tried to struggle free of Joan's deathly grip. She was asleep, and I still did not understand how babies have such a strong grip. "I will place her in a crib," he told me. "Thanks, Jack." When he returned, he grabbed his jacket and smiled at me. "It was nice knowing you, Eric. Will we stay friends?" "If you want to. I have used you, after all." "I will not mind it again," he rubbed his eyebrow. He was so hopelessly in love with me. He still is, and that is exactly why I regret what I said, or rather did next. "Sleep with me? Last time? Parting sex?" Jack swallowed. That's mean, you know. I know, and I'm sorry. You're always sorry, Eric. You can leave. I sucked on my bottom lip in shame. I still don't mind, he replied, dropped his jacket, and then pulled me in a punishing kiss. Later, as he lay down next to me and traced the angry marks he had left on my body, he said he was an adult. What's that supposed to mean, I asked. Means if I had enough self-preservation, I would have walked out then. I didn't. You didn't? I'm sorry. Oh, Eric, you're always sorry. Jack put his head on the pillow and looked up at the ceiling. Your love for Josh is admirable, he said. I hope I find someone I could be just as passionate for. I hope so. It's funny, I hope that person would be you. Nearly a decade and I still stuck right where I was at the party, admiring you from a distance, gathering the courage to tell you just how pretty you looked in red. And when I finally did, he stopped and looked at me. You were someone else's. Still are. The present time, a year later. It isn't like Jack's the only man whose heart I broke over the years. Well, it is true that raising Joan took much of my time, something that Bella warned me about ages ago. She didn't take enough of my mind to not wander and seek momentary pleasure, only to return home to an empty bed and a colder bedside on Josh's side. It is then that I met Dexter, an absolute hell of a man. On the other hand, Joan's first word was Dad. When Bella was carrying Joan, the surrogacy did happen, yes. She once asked me what I wanted to be called by my baby. I don't know, I told her, closing my eyes and looking out at the sunset. I want to know what the baby will call Josh. Bella smiled at me and patted my hand. It'll not be so bad. I cannot let it be bad, I answered, turning to look at her. I don't have that option. Not after I agreed to the surrogacy. Not when the baby will be out in a month or so. She gave me a sad smile. Always here, she said. And so is Jack. So when Joan's first word was Dad, I told Bella it was for Josh. That seemed right to me at the moment. She is wholly Josh's after all. There's nothing in her that is mine. Not even her brown eyes. She knows Josh, even though she will never meet him. I suppose, Jack told me when I informed him of it. I still think I broke his heart that day. Oh, I'm an absolute hell of a man. And perhaps that's why Dexter came into my life, to punish me. It was only a week ago that I escaped from his hold. Escape, yes. I met Dexter some 5 weeks ago, some 3 years after Josh's death. I dropped Joan at her daycare, and then accidentally met Dexter. He had just returned from dropping off his kid too, and was on his way out. Sorry, he said. Didn't see you walking by. I shrugged. My fault too. Did you drop off your baby? Yes, Joan. What about you? I asked. He shrugged. I did with mine. Got a wife? I don't see one. I gave him a laugh, despite his rudeness. No, not a wife. I'm gay. Oh, he extended his hand and introduced himself as Dexter. Wanna go and talk someone more adult-like, Eric? I, the foolish man that I was, said yes. And for the next 4 weeks, we met only to have sex. Nothing else happened. He was closeted and said that he's still working around it. His wife and he divorced several months back, and he claimed that she cheated on him and that he was still hurt. I was hurt too, and so I took the chance. A chance to forget how lonely I was, and sleeping with him was not bad. He knew what he was doing and what he wanted. Since I wasn't really actively pursuing any relationship with him, I allowed him to do whatever he wanted. Something that I started regretting by the time the 3rd week rolled around. Dexter liked to hurt, and I didn't like that at all. I don't want to continue this, I told him, looking down at my feet. I knew catching his eyes now would be a bad idea, so I avoided looking straight into his eyes. I think I should better focus on my daughter. She's 3, growing up, and I don't want to be one of those missing parents. What do you mean you don't want to see me? I clicked my tongue, now irritated. I told you. Dexter crossed the room in quick strides and shoved me against the wall. His rough hand clutched my throat in a tight grasp, and I tried to break free. I couldn't. Tears escaped my eyes, but he didn't relent. Cat got your tongue, huh? By the time he was done, I was shaking. No, he did not do anything drastic with me. Nothing physical that involved losing clothes. I had a broken lip and a black eye. If you say that again, I will do something bad next. You know my secret, Eric. I cannot let you go. So I reported him to the police. Thanks to the broken lip and the black eye, it was easy. When the cops asked if he did something else, I answered no. He has the self-respect to not go that far. And that was the truth. Days after ending things with him, now I'm sitting next to Joan. She has grown up a lot in the last 2 years, and is growing up very fast. Sure, she's still 3, but she's growing up, something that is scaring the hell out of me. Papa, she says and rushes to me with her tiny feet. I grab her around her waist, and when she finally reaches me, careful so that she doesn't hurt herself. Joan, what have you brought me? I ask, holding out my hand. We are in the park, and I know she has brought something silly. The last time she brought a candy wrapper and said it's nice. I had to buy her a bunch of the same candies for her to throw it in the dustbin. I wonder what it is now. She drops a green thing in my hand, and I scream in horror. Joan giggles. Papa, you will hurt her, she exclaimed when I throw it away. Don't do that again. Is it hurt? She asks. God, I hope it is. No, sweetie, I think it's all right. Okay, Joan gives me a small familiar smile, and I cannot help but grin back at her. The present time, 2 years later. Joan is growing older, I comment, looking at her in her uniform. First day of school, huh? Are you excited? I ask her. She gives me excited nods. Yes, Papa. Jack leans against the car and looks at us both. He'll get used to it. You don't have any kids. Please don't lecture me. Jack raises his hands in mock surrender. All right, sorry. The bell rings, signaling the start of the school. I pat Joan on her little head. My little girl Joan, I say, and wish Josh was here to see this. He would have been so happy to see her like this, in a school uniform. Josh loved children. He would have loved his own daughter. I will be standing right there when the school ends, okay? Eat your lunch, all right? Everything. Even the peas? Joan asks. I cannot help but smile at her innocence. Someday, she will grow as old as me, and she will not think twice before eating a bunch of peas. Oh wow, I mourn the idea, even though nothing delights me more than the idea of her growing up to be as beautiful, talented, and hardworking as Josh. Even the peas, yes. Joan pouts at me, but then kisses me on my cheek. Bye, Papa. Bye, Uncle Jack. My mom still tells me I cried like a hyena on my first day of school, Jack mumbles. Starting the car once I'm fully seated. Kids these days are weird as hell. I'm glad she's not shy like me. It's such a beautiful thing to see. Josh would have loved it. You're gonna say next, will you not? I smile at Jack. You know me very well, Jack. Where to? I will drop you off at the cafe. I have an appointment. Urgent. That's fine with me. Thank you for coming here. Jack gives me a small smile. Anything for a dear friend. I smile back at him, at the cafe. It's a normal affair. People come and people go, and the world remains the same. I try to smile at every customer who walks into the cafe, but it comes out naturally at the sight of one particular person, a stranger, handsome enough to gather my attention, and by the looks of it, I have his too. Hello, he says. Hi, I reply. What would you like to have? He smiles at me, all charming, and I know I'm walking right into a trap. Another fling as if I haven't learned my lesson after Jack and Dexter. What would you suggest? The stranger asks. Many things, I reply and start listing them. 5 hours later, I am back at the school, ready to pick Joan up. When she walks to me, finally, she's with a girl. Papa, Joan says and rushes into my waiting arms. She is Susie, she says and points at a shy girl standing behind her. Hi, Susie. Hello, Susie shyly replies. She's my friend, Joan tells me as we walk to the nearest bus stop. Where's Uncle Jack? He didn't come? He's got some work, I tell her. How was school? Good. Want to return there? Joan smiles at me. Will Susie be there? I shrug at her. Is she in your class? I ask, although Susie looks a little older than the other kindergarten kids. Rightly, Joan shakes her head. She's not in my class. She's in one. Then she will still be there. Joan grins excitedly. Then I want to come back here. The present time, 6 years later. Joan is 11 now, and it's been 11 years since Josh's death. Not that I like comparing the thoughts together, but they come hand in hand. One is a tragic memory that cannot escape its happier counterpart. Honestly, I am guilty to admit that. I do not try very hard either. Something that often brings me shame. But honestly, that kind of proves that I haven't moved on from Josh, yet. I'm growing old and my flings nowadays are older men, too. Oftentimes they're much older than me. Men with either just as tragic a past as mine, or men who just cannot find the will to settle down. And it usually lasts a few months at most. My loyalty to Josh always stops me at the last moment. The moment I feel a little attached. I step back. I never go on dates. And all the meetings always end in one physical thing or the other. No time for romance. Something that both Joan and Susie are taking note of. And now that I have mentioned these two, I must admit that my feelings about the two of them were right. Although I am a little off. I expected them to be best friends at most. But just 2 days ago, I found Joan kissing Susie on the cheek. I knew somehow that it wasn't just a friendly gesture. It was awkward, not because I thought any worse of it, but because the girls didn't want to talk about it. Are you going to think less of me now? Joan asked, looking at me with sad eyes. Susie is sitting beside her, glaring at me as I have done something wrong. No, baby, why would I do that? Because I kissed a girl, Joan asks. No, I reply and start giggling. Joan, sweetheart, I'm gay. I have had. You had another dad, you know, Josh. Joan perked up at that. That's true. I smiled at her. Exactly. As much as I, like you two, are close, I'd rather not you two. I've had a boyfriend too, Papa, Joan confesses. Okay, I reply, and nod at her. She's 11. I know we need to talk. Jesus. So it's not just girls. I think that's not a very nice thing to say in front of Susie, Joan. Joan gasps and turns to Susie, who painfully smiles at her. I like you, Susie, better than I liked him. I know, Susie replies, and I look at them, a little more curiously than ever. In the evening, I met one of my latest flings. He's a man in his 40s, several years older than me. My daughter is growing old. I don't know how to deal with it. Keith, for that is his name, looks at me. She'll grow up to be an adult in some time. Children grow up that fast. I'm afraid she'll leave me. That's how the world goes around, buddy. I don't know what to tell you. You can do better, Keith. You're a professor. Keith smiles at me and sips on his drink. Will you come to my place tonight? I think we need a proper bed. Growing old and I need a proper bed to get the deed done. That's all right with me, but I'll return home after that. Got my child at home. Keith waves a hand at me. All right. When it's done and I'm dressing up, Keith asks me why I'm not dating anyone. You're young, he says. You cannot wallow in grief all your life. I smile at him. Try me. I do, he replies and looks at me, up and down slowly. It's a sad thing what happened to you. Very beautiful to go through so much pain. Well, I click my tongue. Then you and I are cursed. That grief doesn't care for that. Life happens. It happened to me a decade ago. Will you have dinner with me? He asks. No, but thank you. I should go home. But, Keith, this ends between us, I tell him firmly. You're catching feelings, and I cannot deal with that. Do not want to deal with that. There's a reason why I keep it so casual. You're not even trying, he exclaims. I do not want to. You cannot be hung up on a dead man for this long, Eric. You're young. You can still fall in love again. I know I'm stubborn. Several times, Bella has looked at me and said the same thing. Yes, Josh died. It was a tragic, but I cannot waste my time wallowing in grief for the rest of my life. And I tell Keith the same thing I tell Bella. Watch me do it. It's no way to live. I will make it, I tell him, and then walk out of his home as tears rush down my cheeks. Should I? Should I give it a chance? I tried to do it with the guy I met several years ago at the cafe, Kane. It went on for several months, and Kane caught feelings. Our flings were no longer flings for him. They were dates. Although all of them were always about sex. And I tried, but it didn't work out. Heck, it didn't work out with Jack, so how will it with anyone else? I decided the best way to deal with this particular trouble was to just end it. And then I did. The present time, 5 years later. So you two are now girlfriends? I declared, looking at them both with cheerful eyes. Is that correct? We have been girlfriends for a while, answers my 16-year-old daughter, Joan. We're informing you right now. All right, I replied dryly. Thanks for the vote of confidence. We wanted to, Susie answers, but we thought you weren't, well. She stopped in time for Joan to give her a warning glare. I hope you're okay with us. Whatever does that mean? No. Not that bit about if I'm okay with you two dating, but the other one. What do you mean I'm not okay? But are you? Susie asks. Of course I am, kid, I answer. Susie huffs and then excuses herself from the living room. I will go and bring some snacks for us three. You two talk. I turn to Joan. What's going on, Joan? She looks nervous for a while and then sighs. Everyone has someone. Everyone but you. Susie's parents divorced 4 years ago, and now both of them are dating their new partners. When will you, Papa? Hasn't it been some time since... She stops, and then she doesn't say any more. I love them, Joan. I still do. But you cannot live alone all the time. I'm not trying to do that. Besides, I have you, Susie, Bella, and even Jack. Joan makes a face. I'm talking about a boyfriend. You do not have any. You don't even hang around as much anymore. I've sworn off men, I tell her. You're gay, Papa, she replies, her tone deadpan. Well, Joan sighs. I'm not going to be around for my whole life, Papa. You're being incredibly mean. Papa, she exclaims, in 2 years I will leave for uni, and then? Then what will you do? I decide not to answer. I know she will not appreciate any dry humor from me. Susie returns with 3 plates of snacks, and I sigh. Do you guys want to hear a story? I asked, looking at the picture of Josh and me. It was ages ago. Josh was still healthy, and he wasn't as thin as he was when he died. He looks just like you, Susie tells Joan. Well, it was entirely him, so... Joan, you are more than my wish to have Josh around, even after his death, I tell her and put my hands on the table. Anyway, kids, up for a story? Whose story? Joan asks. Mine, I reply with a small smile. The present time, 2 days later. You're in your 50s, by the way, Joan tells me when I half cut the cake. Thanks for reminding him, Jack tells her. I'm still here, by the way. You have a husband, Uncle Jack. Please don't rub it in my papa's face. Joan sighs and hands me my gift. Happy birthday, Papa, but I hope you find yourself someone. You deserve it. Not needed anymore? I ask with a teasing grin. Nope, she answers. It's been 18 years. It's been 18 years, Jack agrees. Nearly 2 decades, Papa. And I can wait some more, I tell them. Papa, Joan says, but Jack stops her. Don't. You're hurting him. I give Jack a look of gratitude. As much as I love that people around me care for me, I've grown tired of this particular suggestion. I've lived 18 years without Josh, and I'm sure I can do more. Joan sighs. What are you going to do now? She asks. Joan got admission into the local university, the same where Susie studies, and while it's not very far from our home, it is far. Instead of traveling so much, both of them now live in a rented apartment near the campus. It's much more convenient. I look at the pen and paper on the coffee table. I'm going to write a letter. Joan's eyebrows furrow. To whom? I smile at her. To Josh. Conclusion. Obviously, Josh will never receive the letter, but I pen the words anyway in the hopes that he knows what I want to tell them. When I've written the letter, I dig a little hole right next to Josh's grave and bury it underneath, thankful for the warm winds that blow soon after. If my delusion is an acceptable thing, then I must admit I believe the winds to be none other than Josh. I never date anyone again, much to Joan's and Susie's bemusement. Oh, but they will come to understand it. I know that. The end. Can there ever be a correct way to cope with the death of a loved one? Let us know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force, and stay wholesome.